Good morning. This is Richard Cheng with the Sativa segment, episode 39. Before we get started, we'll turn our attention to the Cholson M&A advisors. This is the organization that's sponsoring this episode. If you want to know a little bit more about Cholson M&A, go to LinkedIn. It's a lower middle market business brokerage firm. Let's get started. John, thank you for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, we met through a common contact of ours.
Yep.
Thank you, Dan Drabinski in the DFW area. So you're in the payment space.
Correct. Yeah. So I've been in the payment space 10, 15 years now. I acquired a company, the ACH processing company, that I had done had some familiarity with, had worked with, provided some services to in the past. Took it over. This was post. Started out in kind of corporate finance, turnaround consulting, did that in restructuring for a number of years, asset management industry a little bit, and then kicked around after the GFC and looked for some opportunities, and knew this company, acquired it, and got into the payment space.
But it was really your finance background that kind of led you down this path to you breaking off on your own and being an entrepreneur, right?
Correct. I mean, that's how I became introduced to the company, how I understood it. The funny thing is, from when I was looking at the industry, as a financial analyst, I pulled up 10Ks, right, and looked at businesses in the payment space and kind of learn about them. The reality is they're really technology companies, right, with a lot of contracts and connections associated with them, but technology is the core of payments today, and for a variety of reasons. I mean, some of the things we'll talk about here related to the industry that's associated with that as well. Yep. But that was one of the things the company was lacking, so we put in place, we acquired a kernel of a system, and then have been heavily modifying it since, and have built up. We control all of our own systems and platforms. And then we gives us the flexibility to do, explore different industries, provide services to clients, when people come to us with problems that they have. Yeah.
Great. But before we dive into it, let's get to know you a little bit more. You're from Georgia.
Correct. Savannah, Georgia.
Okay. Yeah. Beautiful part of the country. Yeah. Beautiful Spanish mosses, as we talked about earlier. And took my family there to Jekyll Island. What led you here? I think you said you followed your wife.
Correct. So I got married in 2000, and she was starting her residency at Big Baylor downtown for people in the area. So she did, I followed her here, and actually moved here during the Summer Olympics of that year. I remember because, came in and it was going on with the Winter Olympics going on now. It's a great market. It's been, 25 years here. The market's grown the whole time, right? We've been blessed by that, right?
Even when it was down during the height of COVID, our economy seemed like it was still going up.
Sure. Yeah. So, it's kind of one of those things. It's good to be in a market where, values and equipments and, buildings and companies are coming in, right? Yeah.
Now, where'd you go to college?
Boston University.
Okay, so you've really kind of hit up the East Coast.
Correct. Yeah, I was there. So I was there in 90. I'm dating myself. Graduated in 94, and that year there was a record snowfall. So there was a player for the Celtics at that time called the Chief. Right.
Yeah.
He had gotten busted with. He'd gotten busted with like an ounce of weed in his car at one point. But they had a whiteout of him. He was at the height of the record snowfall, and one of the news stations was whiting him out as it went up. And it's like, okay, that's enough. I got to move south of the Mason-Dixon just for sunlight. Yeah.
Well, you graduated in 94, which, by the way, you're really, you didn't graduate that much ahead of me. You only graduated 4 or 5 years ahead of me. So, but by no means are you dating yourself. So you got your degree, you moved down here, you worked for a large organization, you decided to one day buy ACH processing company. Great. How has that worked out? And more specifically, let's really talk about your the transition from that to an affiliate that you're really over now, which is Redfish.
Correct.
Hence the red light that I've provided for us.
So, I mean, the payment space, I mean, we talked about it a little bit. It's a huge industry. There's a lot of different aspects to it. ACH is kind of the payment backbone that, most of the money in the U.S. runs on. I mean, that's things like loan payments, bank transfers, mortgages, payroll, et cetera. The advantage with the ACH network is it runs on different rails than Visa and MasterCard, right? So, within that scope, as you're aware, Visa and MasterCard, there are prohibitions on using Visa and MasterCard products for cannabis-related payments. You don't have those same prohibitions for on the Nacho operating rules and using the ACH network to do transfers. So that provides a unique opportunity to do compliant transactions in conformance with FinCEN guidance and BSA requirements,
That's
right? So all the things that you're supposed to be doing in payments and with cannabis regulations, and you can do it in a compliant manner and not be at risk of shutting down. So we got involved in the cannabis space 8 to 10 years ago, doing mostly payroll, B2B transactions. Clients, more from the supplier side, seed companies, things like that, and then we've had clients come to us. Last year, we had a number of clients come to us and said, "John, you gotta figure out this. We keep running into problems with payment cards. We need a different solution."
And these were mostly B2C, though.
I mean, so these were people who were involved in dispensaries, right? ATM network guys, things like that. People who are providing services, dispensaries, and they're familiar with what's happening in the space. They know that there's, an issue. They keep having problems. We were at MJ BizCon talking to in December in Vegas, and we were talking to somebody, and one of their big chains went down. Their card network, their card processing. And so one of the things, our system, that's not at risk of it. We don't touch Visa and MasterCard. There is no sponsoring bank, so there is not that risk of that payment rail shutdown.
So let's walk through what the experience for the consumer. Let's hypothetically say I am a consumer. I walk into a dispensary.
Correct.
And I want to purchase a product. How is Redfish's platform or your service implemented to make that consumer B2C transaction the way it is? And what is that experience like? So let's walk through it step by step.
So everybody who walks into a dispensary has 2 items on them nowadays, right? They have a driver's license and they have a phone, right? And so we leverage those to kind of to collect the information on who's there, who's transacting, and then affect the transaction. And then what we're using is a pay-by-bank solution where the customer, we can send a link. We have a variety of ways. We built in multiple flexibility. We have, you can do a PIN, we can do a QR code. Like if it's a kiosk, we can present a QR code to the customer and they can scan it. Or we can send it directly to their phone using a text message. With, we happen to include the PIN in there as well. The link that would take them, they would authenticate with their bank. They authorize us to check the balance, use their account information, and then, upon approval, then we would affect the transaction, for the dispensary. We would debit the account and pass it to the dispensary.
So I think we talked about earlier that some of the challenges with ACH is sometimes they may not have enough funds. So how does the system or the business handle when that occurs?
Well, so I mean, that's the same thing. We're looking at the same balance that a debit card would be looking at, right? So if you have enough money to go to that ATM in the corner, right, you have enough money to do the transaction through our system. Right.
So there's really nothing preventing this system to be implemented into other industries, not just cannabis. So if another industry wanted to use it, they could.
That's correct. Yeah, you're starting to see it more broadly accepted. And thank God, it's you go into Walmart, they have a pay-by-bank solution as well at the retail. And so the adoption by big players, helps encourage adoption for the industry, helps lift the whole industry.
So I'm just curious. You're running ACH processing, and what were the internal discussions like to say, hey, listen, we want to start Redfish, but more specifically, want to start Redfish for the purposes of servicing the cannabis industry?
Yeah, I mean, so part of it's, branding. ACH processing company, handles, accounts for, large corporates all the way to, small mom and pops, everything in between.
Because you have partners though, right?
Correct. Yeah. And so, we needed to have an affiliate for the cannabis space. I mean, as people who are in the space understand, have the separation of the brand there. But it was really about solving the customer need, right? We had multiple customers come to us. It's serendipity. It's kind of funny. The world works that way sometimes, right? But, we had multiple customers come to us in the span of like 2 to 3 weeks. We had 2 to 3 customers come to us say, "Hey, we have this problem."
Do you think something was going on during that time, or what precipitated that such a short amount of time with multiple customers doing that?
Yeah, I mean, some of it's kind of the underlying changes to the industry. When there's or guidance, or maybe it's frustration at that point. They keep seeing the same problems over and over again, right? The definition of insanity. So maybe try something different, right?
Okay, so there really was. It didn't sound like there were any challenges internally within your own company to say, "Hey, we're going to take on this endeavor in a arguably stigmatized industry."
Yeah, I mean, but like you said, I mean, it's it's an entrepreneurial aspect, right?
Yeah.
You see a problem, you try and solve it.
Okay.
Right? And it helps if you have kind of good partners in the space. If you're familiar with the space, and already work in the space, we'd gone to MJ BizCon in New Orleans in, I think it was 2019, pre-COVID. We were already in the space, already working with companies already.
Those were the days when they had MJ BizCon had 2.
Yeah.
They had the New Orleans one in May.
Yeah.
And they also had the one. They've always had the one in December, which is the annual meeting.
Yeah.
So I know exactly what you're talking about. I don't think they have the May one.
They don't have it. Yeah, I don't. So,
yeah. So you start Redfish, and are you guys based here in Dallas?
Correct. Yeah, we're actually just right up the road, actually near your corporate office.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, near the law firm. Okay,
yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Are you servicing just Texas right now, or are you all over the place?
Nationwide.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything, even Puerto Rico, right? Yeah. So they connect to the U.S. banking system. So we're working with the dispensary group out of there. They have some unique challenges with some of their banking. We were talking earlier about, banking access in the space. Mm-hmm. They still have some challenges down there. With,
like what?
So the co-op bank that they're working with only allows them to deposit cash and won't allow them to use that account balance to pay their vendors.
Okay.
So all of a sudden they're limited in what they can do with the transaction. Again, we're working with them to utilize a pay by bank solution, a different account, and then provide them payment solutions at that point.
So as you know, I mean, in states like Texas, we don't have a robust adult use market.
Yeah.
And we have arguably a very limited medical market.
Mm-hmm.
We do, however, have a large hemp beverage, hemp consumable goods market.
Correct.
Are you in that hemp space at all?
Correct. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
In addition to that, you're also in the traditional dispensary space in states like, say, Oklahoma or Colorado.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
How do you handle, are there protocols that you use that's different in one market versus the other?
Not really. I mean, for the most part, we try and build the system to be, kind of compliant to the lowest common denominator, right?
Okay.
Some of this is that yes, there's state regs, right?
Yeah.
All these states are, because it's federally legal, the states step forward with a more robust regulatory structure, right?
Yeah.
But that said, there are still some federal guidelines, right, around, prohibition to minors, right, selling to minors, not diversion of funds, right, diversion of business. And, this is something that's still a challenge for the business quite a bit, the black market, right, in California and some of these markets, the amount of kind of unlicensed, product going out, right? Problems like that, but those are universal. Those are across the whole country. Yeah. And so what we did was we built our system to, kind of comply with all of that, right? If you're you have to know who the person is. Many states, so for instance, the ID scanning, right? So we scan an ID when somebody comes in, right? And part of it, puts them into the queue. The bud tender can then use that to affect the transaction, or it can be integrated into a system so that it can just, it can work with an ERP system or a POS system. But part of that is complying with that age verification and validity errors. In some states like Nevada, as you're probably aware, have a requirement that you scan. Most states it's just visual. But the problem with that is you don't know if, so MJ BizCon, the number was, don't shoot me, 70% is still cash of the industry. People dispute that, but 70% cash. If you walk in and you don't scan the ID, you walk into a dispensary in many states and they look at it at the door before you enter. And that's a requirement in many states. And then you go to the bud tender and they check it again. Sometimes they're like, oh, let me check it for the cameras. And then you pay in cash, maybe from the ATM in the corner, maybe you had cash on you. There's no record that John Ennis was in there buying that product at that day. And that's a, is it an explicit violation of, kind of FinCEN guidance or state regs? Maybe in some cases you can make that argument, but it's certainly not the intent of the law or of those regs. Where, if how that you didn't sell to a minor if you don't track it?
So what I'm hearing is with your system, you're able to not only track it and create a record for the purpose of, one, efficiency, and two, appropriate record keeping, but also three, for compliance reasons. And so there is an incentive for the business to utilize your system for those purposes.
Sure. I mean, maybe you don't have a compliance problem today. But that's not to say that
can change really quickly.
No, in that case, give Richard a call. But
you need to call Ritter Spencer Cheng.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, but that's true. I mean, you should. We believe in kind of doing things the right way, right? And like I was talking about earlier, I referenced a seed to sale kind of tracking system they're using. I was talking to a guy yesterday. He's building a chain-based system, or they have a chain-based system to track all the way from the grower to the consumer. And this was like his anecdote was like, look, I was at this conference and I asked everyone in the attendance, do you know what you're smoking? Do you absolutely, and oh yeah, but like, do you really know what you're smoking? Right. And the only guy who raised his hand was a grower. Right?
Yeah.
Because he was the only one who really knew what he was smoking.
Of course he did.
Well, But I mean, but it's that lack of kind of being able to track it. And now their system has like QR codes where you can meet the grower, right? Like they're very grower centric, which is good. Right? Really support the legitimate licensed growers, right? But then again, that goes back to that compliance that we're talking about in those regs and those FinCEN guidance. Number two of the Cole memo, one is prohibition of minor. Number two is no diversion. Right, effectively, right? You know that you're not trafficking with, illegal operations, things like that. How do you know that if you don't have a system like that?
So how knowledgeable does the bud tender have to be to utilize your system? And I guess if they're not, does Redfish provide any type of like training mechanism to their clients to utilize their system?
Sure. I mean, we provide user training, and but it's fairly straightforward. When you scan the ID, it tells you are they over 21. And then they check the expiration. We weren't sure about the expiration, but we were actually talking to a dispensary chain in Colorado, and they were like, "Oh no, we've had mystery shoppers come in. We're supposed to turn away somebody if their license expired.
Oh, they get mystery shoppers?
Yeah. They get mystery shoppers come in and
because I've heard that in others, in certain states. I haven't heard anybody from Colorado doing that yet. So that's got to be interesting to have those mystery shoppers walk in just for that. Yeah, depending on whatever their purpose is.
But if you're a dispensary, right, you don't want to have to rely on the bud tender kind of make oops.
No,
what if
you
they
don't. And that was my
check?
point is that, the bud tender who they vary in level of sophistication and knowledge. So in my mind, going through the process, how knowledgeable does the bud tender have to be? Or is your system standardized enough to where the deviation and knowledge of the bud tender really wouldn't impact the experience that much? And that, I think, to me at least, that's a benchmark of a good system, because employees come and go.
Yeah.
Your system stays.
Yeah.
So.
Well, no, I mean, that's why, Apple's a $1 trillion company, right? They got that user interface and that kind of intuitive use down, right?
Right.
And then like companies like Square, that's why Square, I was talking to a guy last night, a new, kind of agent for us. And, it's like, look, that's why they made a simple interface, right? If you make it easy, it's really hard to do. It's harder to do sometimes than people from the outside think.
Well, there's a saying, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to explain something complicated in an easy, straightforward way. So
Correct.
making things easy in a complicated process is really hard.
Yeah.
So
hopefully, we think it's easy. I mean, they just got to scan it, and
is Square
it tells them.
Consider a competitor to your
No,
system?
I mean more just kind of general payments. This was we were talking to about kind of more general payments than cannabis. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you a question regarding the Safe Banking Act. As you know, the federal government has made multiple attempts to pass legislation to essentially lower the regulatory barriers for financial institutions to bank cannabis-related businesses. It's passed the House 7 times, I believe. It's never quite passed as the law.
Yeah.
If it does pass, how would that change Redfish, and how would it impact your company and really the growth of your company?
So it would open up a lot of banking opportunities. I think we touched on that earlier. So you would have a lot more banks come in. You would have a lot more of the big, the money center banks, the regionals maybe would step into it. Right now, as
do you see more credit card use?
You would see credit card use. Yeah, absolutely. And so that's one of the things. Our system, it's built off of our gateway platform. We're kind of our payment gateway platform. We have the capability to turn on and off ACH and credit card on that. So we can, at that point, we'll have, if a bud tender or a dispensary is using our platform, we can just turn on credit card capability there at that point, and it can work the same way.
Oh, okay. So your software is designed to where if you need to switch from ACH to credit card and vice versa,
correct,
there isn't a whole lot of there isn't a lot of transitional barriers.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, it's actually the system is mostly it's mostly a configuration. Just hey, these companies, these dispensaries are restricted to ACH services, right? Yeah. And so any of their invoicing, any of their retail, the pay by bank POS solution, any of that stuff is only going over the ACH rails. But in the future, we can turn that on to enable card. Okay.
So it sounds like you already have a system in place to where if it's go time and you need a switch, you already have the systems in place to do that.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. Do you foresee yourself having to do that?
If it passes, sure. Yeah. I mean,
do you think it'll pass?
I would think so. I mean, it should, right? I mean, it's one of those things that it brings in. It brings in unsavory players. I mean, so let me step back, right? So you walk into a dispensary nowadays, and a lot of them have PIN debit systems in there, right? Or some of them even have straight credit card processing systems. And at a minimum, there is, I hate to use the word, but it's like fraudulent misrepresentation happening somewhere. Somebody is misrepresenting what is happening there, right? That this is the Visa, that whoever the rail is running on, it does not know that that's a cannabis payment in one way or the other, right? Or else it wouldn't happen, right? And then that's why it gets shut down. Like people figure it out. Oh, you're actually running out of, here's the location, and they're supposed to actually track. If I recall correctly from FinCEN or from some of the guidance, they want. If you're doing a transaction somewhere, you're supposed to, for the ATMs, the ATMs, you're supposed to know the location of that, right? Yeah. And same thing, if the PIN debit's running over the ATM network, they're supposed to know the location, supposed to specify what that location is, and then that's correlated to or it's at the same location as a dispensary. Doesn't take that too much to figure out. But it is a misrepresentation, right? Of that something's happening there, and it's better not to do that, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm surprised it hasn't been a bigger priority for a couple of reasons to pass safe banking.
Yeah.
For two reasons. Not this past December, but this December before that, I was in a private dinner. It was a private, we'll call it a round table, but it was a very large round table, and the people that led it, a couple of the people in that private dinner is tied to the current administration. Mm-hmm. So got some pretty good insight. And apparently one of the number one priority for this administration, at least for this industry, which of course this industry being on a priority list for this administration is like 125, right? It's like way down here. But within that 125, Safe Banking Act was the number one priority. Sure. And I'm surprised I haven't heard anything about it yet, but instead it's more the rescheduling.
Which, I mean, you bring up the rescheduling, that's not even completed yet, right?
No, it was just it was an executive order to expedite the rescheduling, which still hasn't been expedited.
Correct. It hasn't been done. And even if it is, it still doesn't solve the payment problem. It doesn't, it doesn't go to the extent that the Safe Banking Act. And just step back. I mean, the Safe Banking Act, I agree with you. I think, that it should pass, right? I mean, it eliminates some of the barriers, the structural barriers.
I think it should pass. I'll tell you why I think it is the one that, in my opinion, most likely to pass with an administration like the one we have. Because I think it's the one that's most tangential to the plant itself without touching the plant itself.
Yeah.
Right? So it's kind of like baby steps. Well, you don't want to go straight for the plant. Yeah. But what's a safe area to essentially increase commerce and test out the waters? Well, why not make it safe for the financial institutions? Yeah. And then if that works out, let's see where we go from there.
Well, so there was a case, I think it was a year or so ago, Southern District, Florida, I think it was. Okay. I'm not a lawyer. But it was, somebody tried to challenge a dispensary tried to challenge a payment processing agreement, tried to get out of it. Terminate the agreement on the grounds that the payment processor was violating the Controlled Substance Acts by processing, and they ruled no, this is their process. They're charging a fee. The payment processor is doing this work and charging a fee to process a payment, not to transact, not selling marijuana. Even though that was what the payment was for. Right. But they held that was a separate transaction and distinct, that they were getting paid for processing the payment, they were not actually selling the product.
That's interesting.
And so it validated that these agreements are valid, these processing agreements are valid and enforceable at the federal level.
And this is in a federal court in Florida?
Correct. I think it was, yeah. I believe. Yeah, I mean, that would be seeing that, yeah. So I can get you the reference.
Yeah, I'd be interested in reading that case.
But it's a baby step, right? I mean,
it is a baby step. Yeah, because when I was told the Safe Banking Act was a high priority, the number one priority within this world. Yeah. I thought, that makes sense because it's probably the most it's really a good way to test the waters without causing too much controversy, in my opinion.
But we have Snoop Dogg as the ambassador to the Olympics. What kind of controversy we have about marijuana these days?
Touche, right? That's true. So as far as Redfish in promoting your services, do you have a team of marketers that goes out and sell your services? How are you getting the word out there in terms of promoting Redfish?
So we do have agents and who work with us and partners who are in the space. ATM, we have a group of variety of people who provide ATMs to dispensaries, for instance, or services to dispensaries, or you attack it from the other side, like, hey, we're the supplier. Like this group yesterday, we were talking about the seed sale. He's going from the grower, but that takes it down to the dispensary level as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so are you utilizing online marketing or SEO marketing at all?
We are. So we have LinkedIn, Instagram campaigns running.
Okay. So I'll be able to find you on LinkedIn. Find it.
Yeah.
If I type in Redfish, I'll be able to pull it up.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so
I'm going to go look it up after this.
I think actually there's a picture of me on there at one of the conferences recently. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, as we wrap up, I mean, tell the audience what are the plans for Redfish moving forward in 2026 into 2027, and really, where can people find you, and what's the best way to get hold of you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so we have Instagram and LinkedIn. We have those channels open. Redfish Pay, info@redfishpay.com. You can go to our website and contact us as well.
Yep.
We also show up at conferences. So we were at the NEAA recently, which is more of kind of payment professionals, merchants. But we're going to the PBC, which is more of a niche. It's a payments, banking and payments for the cannabis, and that's in September. We'll be there. We're looking at some other conferences. We'll be at these are more kind of maybe payment related, but we were at MJ BizCon. We'll probably likely do that again this year. Yeah, they're already sending us exhibitor requests.
Yeah, well, our law firm gets them too, so I know what you get. These start early. These are still selling stuff early.
Yeah, it's a while.
It's wow, it's already it's only 10 months away. So
but they can send us emails. I mean, my email johni@redfishpay.com. I mean, anybody can contact us. We're happy to talk about it. We again, we believe in kind of in working with people to make sure that they're kind of trackable, traceable, compliant payments, right?
And that's important.
It's important.
It's very important.
That's the regs.
Yeah, that's very important. Yeah. That's great. I think you have a wonderful product, John. Yeah. And I hope people start contacting you in processing payments the right way.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of other things. We work with groups like the seed to sale, the systems and the ERP systems and things like that.
Are you talking about Metric?
Groups like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, there's, kind of the POS system, or kind of the kiosk and the systems where, people manage their inventories and do sales. But then, the seed to sales companies, we really like that because, again, it's, what was talking, the lack of diversion and tracking, what that product is, what you're actually smoking, what, that the business is doing things the right way too, the dispensary. So one of the things that's kind of maybe different about our product, and so we were talking about dispensaries. We were talking to a dispensary group out of Colorado 2 weeks ago, and the lady was explaining to us, look, the problem is, the PIN debit systems, right? You see those around. You walk in, you do a $97 transaction. Right. Great. So the way the PIN debit systems, if people aren't familiar with it, they round it up to usually the next $10 or $20, right? And then the bud tender then gives you cash back. So in this case, $97 transaction, the bud tender, it rounds up, they use the PIN debit, maybe there's a fee on top of it, but then it's $100, right? They give you $3 back, cash back. The consumer probably doesn't have any other cash on them. Who carries cash these days? And then, they can't do another transaction. So how much of a tip is that bud tender going to get? $3. That's it. Right. So we've built in integrated tipping capability into our system so that, you could do an array, okay, we're way over tipped in America, right? We acknowledge that. But, if you want to tip
they're
your
even
bud
asking
tender,
for tips on kiosks nowadays when you don't even interface with anyone. It's why am I tipping you? Because you're a kiosk?
Because you're affecting the transaction.
But great feature through Redfish. I think it's, I think those bud tenders, for the amount of work that they do, I think they deserve it.
Well, I mean, if you want to provide superior service, you should get compensated for that, or the person should be able to do that if they want to, and that our system enables that. So we, the bud tenders, we heard that at MJ BizCon. That's very important, right? The bud tenders want to be able to kind of
do other systems have that limitation to where you can't tip?
You can't. I mean, PIN debit, you can't do it. Right? I mean, it depends. So you don't really. You don't see it. I mean, I do market research, right? You don't really see it.
That actually is a good feature. Now, as I'm absorbing this, even though and people who know me, they know that I absolutely hate the tipping culture these days, because it's like, I'm not going to tip you, kiosk, or I'm not going to tip you $5 just because you took my order at the counter. I mean, that completely destroys the original intent of tipping back in the day. And I will say that loudly on my show and be very, very vocal about it. But with that said, your product, your feature with the tipping is absolutely justified, absolutely necessary. I think it's a great feature.
Yeah. I mean, you want the dispensary and the bud tender, they want to provide that service, right? Yeah. And they should be, hopefully they can get compensated for that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, John. I mean, I really enjoyed this conversation, and thanks for making the time to come on to the show. So,
Great.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks.